What's up, C-Rock? Good morning, everybody. We are in Breakfast with Champions on Clubhouse, where we are about to dive into a in-depth presentation on how to prepare a strong offer, literally the pre-negotiation, the negotiation, and post-negotiation strategies that I've used over the past decade plus, thousands of transactions at this point to find success for my clients. Now, who am I? My name's Justin Conical. I will share my screen, share a little bit about who I am. This is Grand Bend, Ontario, southwestern coast of Canada. I love photography. I took this photo of the pier. Yes, we have beaches in Canada. There's incredible fishing up here as well. And this lake, yes, does freeze in the winter time. So if you want to see what that looks like, follow my stories. It's pretty entertaining to see how this shifts over the years. This is my actual website. So if you want to connect with me, you can go to justinconico.com. It's a silly little picture of me. And I've built my business by getting around people like Sirhan and other people that have shown me how to just rocket my business forward by executing some simple things. And I'm going to pass that along to you. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I will get around them and I will share everything that I know. Something important to share is I am not for sale. So I don't sell any courses. I'm not recruiting. My brokerage actually has a waiting list of real estate agents, which is kind of weird in the real estate business. Yet. Well, I've got something for you. Actually, so Kim Walsh Phillips is actually in my ear on Clubhouse and asking about, why don't I sell courses yet? I'm kind of taking the Alex Hormozy strategy of really just building that thought leadership, giving away all my best stuff for free because the relationships I'm looking for are in a different place than the individual, say, course purchases I would get right now. So high level, if you're watching this video and you're looking for a house anywhere on the planet, one way you can support me is by sending me that referral and saying, hey, I need an amazing agent in Naples. I need somebody in Colorado, Israel, UK. I have those networks. I'm a Sirhan Global Ambassador, one of out of 7 out of 10,000 plus agents globally. I'm one of the McGillivray trusted real estate agents, Scott McGillivray from the TV show Income Property. Been working with him for close to a decade. And I'm also in the Tom Ferry ecosystem. So I've got access to some insane networks that are not just reliant on my logo. So the next thing you can do as well is on my resources page, I'm actually going to share this slide deck that I'm about to go through. So I'm actually going to walk through an entire agreement of purchase and sale, how I think about offer strategies, some tips that may help you get a house at a better price. You can use this to kill a deal on your own. And if you want these resources, just go on to justinconico.com/resources. I will drop that on Clubhouse in the pinned link as well. And that'll get you on my mailing list. And I'll blast this out hopefully by Monday. One thing that I could definitely use is some guidance on finding a full-time executive assistant to help me with this stuff, but I will get it out. I promise. Let's get right into it. So preparing a strong offer. Now, for context, this is Southwestern Ontario. This is the ORIA Standard Agreement of Purchase and Sale. But if you're doing any type of negotiation for real estate, you have to have the same considerations almost no matter where you are. That is price, that is closing date, that is deposit, that is the chattels, and then the conditions. That forms most of the context of the offer. Now, I have to say that I'm not a lawyer. Don't play one on TV. Always make sure that you're working with professionals. I would always encourage a lawyer review clause if you can get it in your contract. Make sure you're working with a specialist too. I have seen disasters of lawyers redlining and sending me back contracts that like I almost have to rewrite for that lawyer because they don't specialize in that type of real estate. Another very unique thing about Prime, we're one of the only brokerages on the planet that does every class of real estate. So typically you're dealing with like just a residential brokerage or just a commercial brokerage or just an investment brokerage. We literally do residential, commercial, investments, agriculture, recreational properties, new development, land acquisition, and private funding. So I have interestingly seen how the dynamics of that works across all asset classes. So the very first thing that I'm going to say is when you're working with somebody, you need to make sure that you're connecting with a realtor and a power team that knows that product. I'll caveat this by saying I'm not for sale. Like I said earlier in this video, I'm not thirsty for business. I'm very selective about the clients that I work with. So be cautious about the realtors that are just thirsty for business and saying, yes, I'll work with you. And yes, I can totally do that. Make sure that they actually have a track record in it and they can talk the talk. That's ultra, ultra important. So the factors to consider in structuring an offer are much more than just price. Everybody thinks it's just price. Price to me is actually, it's important, but it's not the most important because all of the other factors basically boil down to like the net effective deal. because I can tell you that you're going to pay, call it $1 million for a property. But what if you're doing a 2-year close and, the carrying costs for that seller end up costing them an extra $150,000 and $200,000? Well, maybe they're actually only getting $800,000 as a seller. So the actual closing date matters more than you may think. The deposit amount matters as well too. The price irrevocability period. So the irrevocability period is how long you have to accept an offer. So if I send an offer to Kim and we're negotiating and I'm saying, hey, Kim, my sellers want to put an offer $1 million for that beautiful property that you have. It's irrevocable until 5 p.m. That means her clients can accept it up until 5 p.m. If she signs it back at 5:01, it's a dead deal. Doesn't classify as an offer anymore. If they change anything on that offer and they strike it out and they initial it, it's no longer a valid offer anymore. So understand that timestamps matter in the digital age more than any, because we can actually timestamp based off DocuSign, AuthentiSign. And I've seen case law where it comes back and there's a dispute amongst the closing and like one initial was done at the wrong time and it completely invalidates the contract. Now it comes down to the contract, the way it was written, and there's a lot of considerations beyond that, but I would be respective of the irrevocability times. The clauses that you include in a contract could be inspection, financing. You can have clauses for almost anything you imagine on some of our large, complex commercial transactions. Our clauses could be due diligence, environmentals. It could be zoning, looking for zoning amendments. It could be very complex, but I've also seen $10 million plus deals with one general due diligence clause because the seller doesn't really care what you're doing. They just want to give you the time to actually do it. And then the conditional period. So if you accept my offer, Kim, how long I have to get my actual due diligence done. Keep in mind when drafting an offer, you need to understand the seller's motivation to sell. It's not always about the price, and the strength of your offer may have more to do with the construction of the contract than it actually has to do with the highest offer price. There's an interesting phenom in real estate called wholesaling. And what wholesaling is if you drive around your town and you see thousands of signs saying, we'll buy your house for cash, typically those people are going to say, hey, you don't have to touch your house. You don't have to pay real estate fees. Call me. I'll buy your house and make it super, super easy. You don't have to have showings and open houses. The business model there is either they're typically investors looking to find under market properties, right? So if you're a seller and you call them and you could have got $1 million, they'll buy it for like 700 or 800. And if you're okay with that, go for it. If you don't know that you could have gotten more, that's a different story. Sometimes what they'll do though is they'll tie up the deal, maybe at 800 or 700, and they don't actually want to close on it. They actually want to sell it to somebody else and then assign that contract for a profit. The reason I kind of go through that whole story is the seller's motivation in that scenario is quite often very different than a seller that just wants to go to market and get the highest price. So understanding seller motivation is absolutely critical. How can you do that? It is the pre-offer due diligence. And this is where my strategy over the last decade has been to keep insanely good relationships with the other realtors and people in our community as well. My content strategy is such that I want to make sure when my name shows up on the phone, whether it be a buyer, seller, or another real estate agent, it comes with a certain level of authority, respect, and trust that maybe some other people don't have. Case in point, yesterday I was negotiating a deal and I had an in-depth conversation with a real estate agent about content creation. He's a direct competitor, but it doesn't scare me. It actually encourages me to do more content. Yet we're discussing a deal, right? And we're trying to get to the nuts and bolts of getting an actual deal done for my clients. The interaction that we had is very different than just texting or emailing that agent and saying, hey, are you going to send an offer? Yes. How much would your clients take? There's no actual interaction. And I was able to find a lot more out about his buyer's motivations. He tried to find out more about my seller's motivations. And that's where negotiation and strategy comes in. The closing date matters very, very much if the property is vacant, or are they going to have to give notice to the tenants if it's, say, an investment property, or are they requesting a specific closing date? I'm going to go back to the pre-offer negotiation strategy. And when I'm talking to agents, even from when I actually book my first showing, I'm in negotiations, right? So if I book a showing for now Kim's my buyer. So if I book a showing for Kim Walsh Phillips, I'm showing her incredible lakefront properties in Grand Bend, and I'm booking 5. When I'm booking those properties, I'm calling those agents and I'm trying to figure out the story. Man, it's a gorgeous property. Why are they selling? Like, the beach is amazing. And I can usually find out the context of those stories before I even get to the showing. Now, mum's the word, and I try and not give any of my cards away when I'm calling them about my buyers. But if you are strategic in the right questions and compiling the right information and taking notes in your CRM, when it actually comes time to offer date, you can reference those notes and typically have a leg up in the negotiation. And sometimes finding somebody that isn't motivated to sell right now at all, but understands creative financing. We'll get to that at the end of this presentation. I'll actually show you a case study where I got a $1 million vendor take back mortgage for a client of mine, and he made $1 million on that property. I'll show you that deal at the very, very end. The deposit, this varies wildly. I know we have a global platform on this YouTube channel. So I'm not really going to go into context of saying, what a deposit would be in your market. Suffice it to say, before the pandy and, even during the crazy sellers market, it would be approximately 1% of the purchase price. So if it was a $700,000 property, you would typically be, $7,000. It got up to about 3 to 4% in some of our crazy primary markets. So Toronto was doing 5 to 6% on specific deals, and you would have to go in if you were literally no conditions, no appraisals, contingency, you were up against 50 offers. The one thing you could do is come in with an insane deposit, because what that would mean is if you fail to close, they get to keep that deposit. Now let's go through what a seller's market looks like and what was actually happening during that time. In Canada, people were coming in with all cash offers, and all cash simply meant that they didn't have a financing contingency. Very big difference between Kim Walsh Phillips showing up with a bag of cash and actually paying for a property with cash and not taking out a mortgage, and Uncle Jimmy saying, I'm not putting a financing contingency in and I'm all cash, and then actually having to go get a mortgage. Because here's something that a lot of people don't know. The financing in Canada will depend on the appraisal. So the bank, you may be pre-qualified. The bank actually doesn't care about you. They care about the risk of you not closing on the property. So they may qualify you up to $1 million, but if you go firm on a deal, no appraisal contingency, no financing condition, and then the bank before closing orders an appraisal, and that $1 million property that you bought, they tell you is worth, they're only going to lend you on 700. You got to come up with $300,000 to close. And if you're that stretched for cash, you might not have the $300,000. So the risk for a seller, and a lot of sellers don't understand this, is if the deposit isn't enough, or you haven't vetted the buyers, or you're not working with an agent that understands that, you are actually at risk, because you may miss one of the best selling seasons being tied up on a deal, and then that person fails to close. Another strategy I want to share with you is understanding that when somebody's going to fail to close, the solvency and the skills of the person you're working with matter so much. I referenced finding a good lawyer and a good real estate agent. We have had, over the last 3 or 4 months, case after case where we would get a call from the agent saying my client's not going to close. And that's because the market's shifted. Everybody knows it, right? February, March was absolute seller's market. We've had a big increase in inventory. Prices have stabilized. I think it's healthy for the market. I think everybody needed this to happen to a certain degree. And buyers are like, well, I bought this in February, March for $1 million. It's worth 700 now. My deposit's only 50. I'm just going to walk away from the deal and lose my 50. That makes sense, right? Not if you call Justin, because, hey, Uncle Jimmy, yeah, no, I totally understand. They don't want to close. Okay. So they're going to lose the 50. I'm going to relist the property for 700. We're going to sue you for the $300,000 difference. And my client bought a property in Toronto. She put down 60K. She's going to delay the close. So you're okay. So just tell your client he's probably going to be on the hook for about $500,000 in damages. Okay. Guess what Uncle Jimmy does? They find a way to close. So understanding the scope of what that looks like, and my ability to reach out to the lawyers and work through case law and understand with the lawyers how I can be their partner and get people motivated to close, is another negotiation tip for you. I'm getting in deep today. If you want the slide deck, just hit my website, justinconoco.com. Go to the resources section. I'll send this out to you. If you're live on Clubhouse, because we stream every single Friday, 7 a.m. to 7:30, you can go to the top of the room if you want to join the YouTube live. I'm actually going to stop the screen share for one quick second. I'm going to go into the chat. I see Cheryl Solheim. Good morning, Breakfast with Champions. Olivier Maurice. He's actually an amazing commercial real estate broker in Montreal. If you're looking for somebody, give him a shout. Tell him I sent you. He actually sells churches and some of the craziest properties. I see James. Good morning. Linda. Dream Plan Start Go. I see Wendy. I see Queen Bee. There's a lot of you here. Debbie Dowling. Good morning. Living in Castle Rock, Colorado. Man, I love this. I absolutely love that the comments are blowing up. And one of my favorite people on the planet, DM Dora Maria Baru. She crushes the stage on Breakfast with Champions. Go give her a follow and subscribe to her YouTube channel. This is a community. This channel is my way of giving back. Sometimes I don't feel like I should be in the position that I'm in. I was an absolute mess. If I can do what I did and God gave me the ability to get where I am today, I really just want to pay it forward and show you that you can learn all this stuff yourself. Everything on this channel is built around branding, marketing, strategy. I do deep dives into how I do my productivity, how I manage all the businesses, and all the resources are free. Never asking you for anything on this channel. So I'm going to go right back to the actual screen share. We got about 10 minutes left to get through the balance of the offer strategy negotiation. So the purchase price, the one that everybody thinks is number one in an offer. So let's get deep on the purchase price. So the first question you got to ask yourself is, how long has the property been on the market? A lot of people think just because a property's been on the market for 30 or 40 days that they can lowball that property like nobody's business. Now we're entering the actual negotiation piece. When you structure the contract, understand how you approach the negotiation may dictate whether or not you even get the property, because put yourself in the seller's shoes. They may not think you're a serious buyer if you're just taking lowball shots at everything and seeing what sticks. Now, I have other investors that will write 20 to 30 offers a month because they want to find the motivated. And the way they do it is they just paper offers. You don't really get a sense of where a seller's at until you put an actual offer on paper. Verbal offers mean nothing. Any verbal communication between you and the agent mean nothing. In a court of law, unless it's in a contract, it's not going to hold up. So understand that from just a negotiation strategy perspective. Get everything in writing, put it in the email if you can, but make sure it's in the actual contract. What are the actual comparables selling for? This is a bit of a moving target because I can't look at comps at February or March and say it's going to sell for that. I need to make adjustments for the market. Now I stay in the market and I'm an expert on the stats, so I can tell you almost depending on the area what the adjustment price would be from the February, March area price point, but I'm actually looking at the most recent sales, the most comparable properties in the most recent timeframes. So there's a crash course in appraisals for you. When an appraiser comes to your house, there's a house right next door to yours that's identical that sold last week. They are happy as a pig in a puddle. The Glenda Baker's a friend of mine. That is totally her saying, so I'll give credit her for that. The reason is it makes their job super easy. They know that realistically, if another buyer is coming to purchase that property, that's the price that buyer is going to pay. I tend to specialize in selling the most random stuff you've ever met. So I need to look at what is a buyer that's looking at a $2 million off-grid log home with 100 acres of bush looking at in Southwestern Ontario, and then build my model based off that. I could do another session on comparables if you wanted. Are there other people interested in the property? So this is a bit of a moving target. It comes down to relationships as well. So if you know you're working with honest agents, you can also, when you go to a showing, see are there a whole bunch of real estate cards on the table. That will tell you how many people have been through the property. If it's been listed for a long time and there's 100 cards, it could mean nobody's interested. They just left the cards. But if it's the first, second, or third day of the listing, there's a lot of activity. There's probably interest. And then are they expecting multiple offers? Something I didn't mention is I sit on the professional standards board I have for almost 5 years. MLS advisory and brokerage advisory. In Canada, it's against the law to say there's a phantom offer. So you can actually get fined, I believe it's $15,000 plus, and potentially lose your license if you're an agent that says, I have an offer on this property, and you don't. That actually came around in 2017. Probably not the case everywhere. People lie, so you need to take everything with a grain of salt. But if somebody tells me that they actually have an offer, I'll ask them in Canada, is it a registered offer? Because that's very different than saying, oh, we had a verbal offer. And depending on the agent that I'm dealing with, I'm going to have different perspectives on what they're telling me. Then the clauses, and cash offers. So I'm going to talk about both of these. Cash offers apply more to the seller's market that I told you about. There's 50 offers on a property. The seller's really sitting high and mighty. Not the case these days. So we can do another segment strictly on buyer's market. But you want to watch out for assignment clauses. That's the wholesaler thing saying, hey, I'm going to buy your house, grandma, and I'm going to pay you this price. And then they tie it up for 6 months and flip it to somebody else. Means they can assign the contract to another party. Assignment clauses aren't always a bad thing. So a lot of our investors will open corporations for buildings they buy. So if they buy a 30, 40, 50 unit building, they're going to put it under the name of the building, 123 Main Street, for anonymity. But a lot of times you can actually do that assignment to the corporation without the clause, and it'll make sellers feel a certain way. So if I'm the buying agent and the listing agent's a rookie, and he sees an assignment clause and he doesn't know how to explain it or doesn't understand who I am, that seller may make an assumption or a narrative about me that I'm a wholesaler and not even want to deal with me. Marketing before possession. So if you get a property and you're looking for vacant possession, maybe it's an Airbnb, maybe it's an investment property, you can actually insert clauses allowing you to market that property before possession. Interesting trend. I'm selling properties these days that come with an Instagram account. I've sold top rated Airbnb, like properties that have won awards. I actually have one coming up I have 2 buildings coming up that are like showpiece properties that have built-in Instagram accounts and actually have a tenant cycle built into the Instagram account. I would sell those with a marketing before possession clause in there. Vacant possession. So in Ontario, again, I'm going to stick to kind of Ontario law. The RTA is very strong. So if there's a tenant living in a property and somebody buys it, the only way that tenant can get evicted typically is some people call them rent evictions. What that means is somebody's going to renovate a property. In Ontario, the tenant actually has first right of refusal to come back before anybody else at the same price they were paying. So rent evictions aren't really a thing. A lot of landlords aren't necessarily honest about it, but if you call a paralegal, you can actually get a lot back in terms of if you got rent evicted illegally. The second way is if I actually physically move into the property. Again, if I lie to you and I don't actually physically move into the property, I could be liable. The third is cash for keys. So if you go to a tenant and you say, I'm going to pay you $25,000 to leave or $10,000 to leave or whatever that price is that you guys agree, and that tenant signs an N11, then you get proper vacant possession. The way that we do it is we depend on the situation. We're very tenant friendly. These are human beings. I have dealt with hoarders and everything you could possibly imagine empathetically to help them find the right situation, work with property managers, housing to get them situated and put them in positions where they've had a windfall of money and put them with people that can show them how to use that money to actually get into home ownership, right? So, but now you have a vacant property. What does that look like in terms of closing with vacant possession? One fun fact about the Ontario Agreement of Purchase and Sale, the standard language says that the seller has to provide vacant possession. So if you don't have any clauses in the Schedule A superseding that, you just signed a contract saying you're going to provide vacant possession. And if you have a tenant that's not leaving, you could be on the hook. So I'm diving into some of the complexities of the contract. The moral of the story here when it comes to offer strategy is understand that you need somebody educated that knows this stuff, that can explain it to you. I do not mind paying for expertise because if you think it's expensive to hire a professional, you should see how expensive it is to hire an amateur. Let me go to the next section. Conditions in the seller's market. A lot of times in Canada, it was the Wild West. I kind of wish we were a little bit more like the States in terms of the appraisal contingencies. You guys have this term called appraisal gap I learned about being on Clubhouse and masterminding with other agents. Doesn't exist in Canada. Like we were dealing with the seller's market where good luck getting a financing, a inspection condition, or anything in a contract. So you signed a deal, you're closing. So you go to your agent and be like, well, what's this worth? Be like, here's what I think it's worth. What it came down to is me having good relationships with the appraisers and doing my homework before we did the deal. Where is this going to appraise? And I've seen deals where I told clients like, fantastic, it sold for 1.2. It's not going to appraise over $1 million. Here's the high watermark. The buyer can make the decision on the opportunity cost for themselves within that high watermark of where they see the value. But my job is to really help them understand what that is. From the inspection perspective, what we were doing in a seller's market was called a pre-inspection. So an inspection in our area could cost you anywhere from $500 to $1,000, maybe more if it's a large commercial property. But that's like the full health report of the property in a nice binder that you get when you close with all discount codes for all kinds of stuff and appliance codes and stuff. What I would do when I was buying properties is I would tell my inspector, hey, I don't need a report on every property because I'm going to have to write 10 offers to get one accepted. What I want you to do is I want to do a visual inspection with you. I want to look at the building envelope. I want to look at the foundation, the roof, the structure of the property. I want to go inside and I want to look at all the mechanicals. I want to look at the plumbing, the electrical. I want to look for latent defects and code violations and anything that would be a red flag. Asbestos, galvanized piping. I can go on and on and on. But those are the things I want to know about. I may still have to pay full price for the property and not get that negotiated off, but I want to know about it because that affects my net effective deal. So that's one way to deal with it in a seller's market. In a buyer's market, just flip that script and assume that you could probably get an inspection and financing contingency in there. Just make sure you're using a good inspector and a good financing person. 3 negotiation strategies: bully offers, red herrings, double offers. A bully offer is being able to get in before an actual offer date on a property. A red herring is putting things in the contract you don't really care about to get what you want. So maybe a super long closing and a higher price, or flipping it the other way and doing a short closing with a much lower price because you want the lower price. And double offer is actually putting 2 offers in front of somebody so that they can choose which one is beneficial for them. You need to make sure you work through the complexities of what that looks like from an irrevocability standpoint. I would not recommend putting 2 offers on multiple properties and just tying up multiple properties with no intent to close. You could run into some issues there, but other factors to consider: emotional sellers not wanting to sell to investors, multiple offer situations, conditional periods, and additional requests. So again, going back to the emotions piece that I spoke about earlier, understanding the end game of the seller or the buyer is super important before you actually get to the strategy piece. The case study I promised, this was a property that was asking 1.3 million, listed for 2 years, I think. We gave them 2 offers to gauge motivation, price, or terms. One offer was a $1 million offer, cash, 60-day closing, conditional on inspection only. Offer 2 was 1.1 million, a VTB, 90-day closing, conditional on inspection. They countered both offers back at 1.2 million with a VTB or 1.1 cash. So basically, we get a $100,000 discount if we just took the cash offer. We counter back at 1.15 million with a $50,000 deferred bonus upon refinance. So we paid 1.2. We actually paid $100,000 more for the vendor financing because my guy was able to lock in a vendor take back mortgage. So he didn't need to go to the bank for the mortgage. The vendor just didn't get all of his cash on closing, but he locked up a 3-year term at $399. My guy was actually able to go into this property. He was able to get the value up, refinance for 2.2, and then actually pay out the lender, made $1 million on the property. He didn't lift a finger on this property because he had that flexible financing. Suffice it to say, there's a lot of components that come into the way that you structure an offer from the beginning to the absolute end. I hope this provided some value to you. If you want the slide deck for free, just go to justinconoco.com/resources. I'll try and get it out by Monday. If you want to connect with me personally, go to my Instagram, justin.conoco. I answer all my messages myself. If you want to find me, I'm always in Breakfast with Champions on Clubhouse. But I got to go because we got another segment, and I'll catch you on the next one. See y'all.